Hey everybody, welcome back to watching Watchmen, the series dedicated to HBO's Watchmen. Today we are talking about season number 1, episode number 3. And before we get started, let's get a little bit of due diligence out of the way. Let's talk about the things I want to discuss in the episode, and then we'll get to my feelings about it. The main point that I want to talk about in this episode is the fan service that this episode actually did. Now, if you're a fan of the Watchmen comic or just the movie itself from Zack Snyder from back in 2000 and whatever year it came out, like 3, 6, I don't know. If you're a fan of that movie and or the comic, this one did a lot of fan service in terms of what happens there, as well as a lot of the characters. So first off, let's first talk about Jeremy Irons' character, which it is confirmed, as I mentioned in last week's episode, that he might be Ozymandias, whatever you want to call him. He is confirmed as being that character. He even puts on a full costume and does introduce himself as Adrian, whatever his last name is. So it is confirmed that he is the Ozymandias character. Now, something that I found very interesting about his aspect in this episode, there's a lot of interesting things going on with his character, but what's really interesting is seems to be either stuck or being held prisoner, perhaps, on an island or in this particular area, because there is another character that he shares the land and a lot of its resources with, who I guess he struck some kind of deal with, that is supposed to allow him to do certain things but not have other privileges. It's kind of this weird sort of deal. We don't have a lot of specifics about it yet, but I'm really intrigued as to what's going to happen there, because a lot of the things that are happening on his little region are very questionable. I think he might be trying to figure a way to get out of where he's at based on what's going on in his experiments with the Mr. Phillips character, or characters, I should say. But I think that's what it is, but I'm not 100% sure. Only future episodes will tell. But the majority of the time in this episode is actually built around Jean Smart's character, also known as Laurie Blake, who is actually Silk Spectre number 2, who is known from the comics as well as from the movie. So essentially what she has been up to is there was a big sort of, a lot of it's kind of in the background of what's happening in a lot of this series, but based on a lot of notes and the podcast, the official HBO podcast that's going on with Watchmen, things like that, the official Watchmen page, they speculate and say that she had actually continued her sort of vigilantism along with Night Owl. They eventually got caught. She struck a deal and started working with the FBI. So she's still working with the FBI, doing a lot of undercover, not necessarily undercover work, but trying to bring in a lot of vigilantes and task force that she has there. But because she doesn't really have the jurisdiction in Oklahoma where that is kind of happening with Sister Knight's character and a lot of other characters, Mirror Glass or whatever his name is, Mirror Mask, something like that, she kind of has to go there to sort of help them because of the sort of mass police force that they have going on there. It's a big sort of complicated thing. But overall, what I'm trying to get at here is that her character is actually really, really awesome. There's a big storyline there, a ton of different things happening. At first, I wasn't 100% sure that she was going to be the Silk Spectre character that we knew from the comics. But as soon as they said her name was Laurie, that was the first hint. So they hinted that her last name was Blake, which is actually her father's last name, the comedian. That was another big mind-blowing moment. That she actually took her father's last name, because I don't believe she had that before, if I'm not wrong. But also, she ends up actually having this sort of painting of the Watchmen in her flashback times. A bunch of different things that are laid out that lead you to understand that she is that character. But going back, turns out that she's part of the FBI because she got sort of caught or struck a deal. Night Owl, who we find out is somewhere. We're pretty sure he's in prison of some kind, based on the owl in a cage that she has in her apartment. So a lot of interesting things there that she could possibly get him out and him show up later in the series. She's still very much hung up on Dr. Manhattan, though, because there is something that I kind of don't really want to talk about that she does in this episode revolving around him. But the main thing that she does is there's these phone booths that are set up where people can sort of talk to Dr. Manhattan now that he's out on Mars, doing whatever it is he's doing, so he can either choose to or not to listen to what these recordings from people on Earth are wanting to tell him. So essentially she just goes there, talks to him, tells him jokes, as if she was sort of there with him, and she's still very much hung up on him. I like how she's still telling jokes, because she does take on the persona of the comedian or something like that, based on an homage to her father, which is really weird because of the way that she was brought up and her circumstances. with the original Silk Spectre. A lot of weird things happening there, but we're not going to get into that on this episode. But her character is actually really compelling and brought a whole lot of interesting things to this episode that are really intriguing me. And I have to say that my feelings about this episode are hands down, it is the best so far. I just really like this episode. It had a lot of cool stuff. It had a lot of great ideas. It had a totally different narrative with Jean Smart's character and Laurie Blake. There's just a weird feeling about it, but it felt so different but good. It's hard to explain. I just feel like this show gets better and better. And the fact that I was so on the fence with it in the first episode, by this episode already, number 3, I've completely rethought that. I'm completely on board 100%. It has some of the old stuff from the comic book and the movie, but it's also bringing a whole new world and a good sequel and follow-up to what that story was. So there's a lot of great stuff in this show, and I'm definitely highly recommend it because it's got so much weight and so much cool stuff to it. I'm so glad that I stuck with it. I was really on the fence in the first one, but this one definitely has me hooked 100%, and I can't wait to see more, especially with this character. I have no idea where the storyline is going, and for the majority of the show, but I'm really, really invested and really intrigued by it, and I just can't wait until the next Sunday for the next episode. It's been just really good stuff that I can't say enough good things about. If you can get through the first episode, it's totally worth it. Second episode picks it up. Third episode totally ramped up, and you're in it for good. I know it might be kind of too soon, but this I have to say is easily the best episode so far. It had so much different things going for it. Had a little bit of action, a lot of drama, a lot of story building and world building that, again, kind of go back to that original comic and movie that I absolutely loved. And this show is definitely worth checking out. Like I said, I'm 100% on board. If you guys have watched episode number 3 of Watchmen, make sure to let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. I can only hope that episodes continue to get better and better. But I mean, this has definitely been a really big high. I think it might be a little bit too early to say this is the best episode of the season, but this is the best episode of the season. So anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on episode number 3 of Watchmen. Make sure, again, like I said, let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section down below, as well as to make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss next week's episode, episode number 4. Again, I don't know the titles of a lot of these. Are very long and complicated, so I'll just refer to them by episode number and season number. But definitely make sure you're subscribed for next week, as well as make sure you're subscribed if you are watching Titans Talk as well. I'll have a new episode of that coming out soon next week, and probably all my other videos. So make sure you're subscribed. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.